Welcome to the HU Movemakers podcast, where we highlight folks that are blazing the trail and making moves in Howard culture. All right, everybody, welcome to the HU Movemaker podcast. As you know, our goal is to highlight individuals that have contributed to the Howard legacy at the highest levels. And today, I got one of my closest friends, man, a guy I consider a brother, Brandon Jones. He was my roommate for 3 years at Howard, Southside Chicago.
Yes, sir.
Brother went from Southside, from Kenwood to freaking New York on Wall Street to being an alpha. Well, let me go back. Southside, Kenwood High School, finesses that, what I'm saying, was in that program, goes to Howard, involved in student government, did his thing as an alpha, went to work on Wall Street, then went to Silicon Valley to work at Google. Now he's an executive at LinkedIn. So again, this is one of my closest friends, Brandon Jones, best man at my wedding, actually. So Brandon, man, I just want to congratulate you on a new move to LinkedIn. Well deserved.
Appreciate it.
So I just want to start, man. Just tell me, how'd you get to where you are in your career?
First off, man, let me just say, man, it's a pleasure, man, to be on the list of people you're hitting up. For one, a podcast like this is long overdue. And of course, somebody like Josh Mercer is going to make that happen, man, because he always gives the people what they want. And that's going to be part of the story. We're going to talk about, when we get into the Howard days, we're going to talk about a few institutions that are associated with Howard that Josh was a big part of, man. So you're just keeping the tradition up, man. I'm happy to be on that list. Very excited to hear the podcast, et cetera. So, I mean, you hit on it, man. I'm just a Southside Chicago guy. Grew up, Southside Chicago, went to Kenwood Academy High School, which unfortunately people associate with R. Kelly now because he went there, and now with the whole documentary, being out, that's we're notorious for that. But, left Chicago, went to Howard, met Josh, literally my day one dude. We met on day one, orientation line. And basically, as he said, we roomed together, basically roommates 3 years out of 4 at Howard. So we definitely have a lot of memories, stay close, still really close to this day. At Howard, man, I was in the School of B. One of my goals, for myself, man, if I can make it happen, is to actually try to reinvent the School of B and ideally make it the Jones School of Business, because it's not named yet. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna go ahead and put that out in the atmosphere, and hopefully can make something like that happen, man. That would be one of my dreams.
It's gonna cost you.
It's gonna cost, but for me, it's all about, legacy and authenticity, man. And Howard, when I think about how critical Howard was in terms of like creating the person that, is sitting here today, man, and friends and just so many benefits going to Howard, man. That to me is like the epitome of how I can give back.
What made you decide to go to Howard, man? Coming from the south side of Chicago.
I didn't even want to go to Howard, man. That's the crazy part. I don't know. You remember this? All right. So here's a little story. So I went to Kenwood. At that point, I was in a relationship, and when we graduated, we were choosing where we were going to go. I was like, oh, I want to go, with my girlfriend or wherever she goes. And my parents were just like, no, that's not happening. Like, you can go anywhere other than that.
Shout out to the parents, man.
Shout out to the parents, man. At the time, I was like, why would you do this to me? High school, why would you do this to me? And then ultimately, it was the best decision that was ever made for me. I can't say I made that decision, but we had a legacy at Howard. My grand uncle was a professor who taught U.S. history.
Oh, yeah.
He's actually the chair of the history department. My brother, he went to Howard as well. And then after that, my sister, cousin. So there's a strong Howard legacy. But yeah, initially, I went to go to a different school, and I ended up going to Howard. And like you said, the rest was history, man. So yeah, I mean, I'll stop there. But we can get into the Howard experience, so we can kind of touch on the resume at a higher level and talk about like the general experiences, and then double click a little bit later, depending on where you want to go.
Cool. Yeah, man. I definitely want to. I'm always interested in how people come to choose Howard, because now I feel like the brand of Howard is crazy now because of social media, homecoming, Puff Daddy. Then it's like, guys like us, like, man, I came to, like, it's like, what made you come? Because now we didn't really have the access that the cats do now in terms of being able to look up something on YouTube. So yeah, man.
Homecoming, man. Let me
Oh
say this.
yeah.
Homecoming. So I have a brother. He's 11 months older than me, but he's a school year older. We're Irish twins. You know, for people that don't know, you actually can have a brother who same parents, you know, the same age for a month out of the year. So it's a, you know, it's an interesting situation. But he basically went to Howard when I was a senior in high school, and then I came out to visit him for a week during Howard homecoming, and it blew me away. That was the first time I'd ever seen like what I felt was like the most beautiful, like talented group of Black people I've ever seen in my entire life. You know, you got the whole lineup of events. We went to all of them: fashion show, step show, talent show, and like everything blew me away. The whole fashion sense. That's the time. I mean, you know, we came out of 03, so you know, you probably have some younger people in the podcast audience, probably some older people, but in this era, it was all Timberlands. First time I'd ever seen people rocking Timberlands, like just like a regular, you know, a regular everyday thing.
Right, 90 degrees. Let me put on some Timbs.
Exactly. Avarex jackets, if you remember those, everybody had those, man.
Parasucos.
I remember just walking through the yard and by the stadium and just seeing flyers all over the ground for parties that basically were going from like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. or like, you know, like 9 to 5. And I was just like, not only is this like the craziest, it felt like it was a different world, but like it was real. And it was like over and above what I would have ever expected, man. Like it was unbelievable. So
how much about like did you study about the history of Howard? Like, did you know that like all these prominent people went to Howard? Yeah.
Nope.
It's funny.
Like, it didn't, you don't, I mean, it's funny because Howard ingrains that in you when you get there. You know what I mean? I probably forgot a lot of stuff now, but the reality is, nah, man, it was really about, you know, when you're making decisions as a high school kid, unless your parents are telling you where to go, you're making your decisions based on social reasons and like cities and all that 100%. Kind of stuff. So
you get to Howard. Like, what's the plan when you get to Howard? Like, are you saying like I'm gonna be an executive? Like, what's your?
Nah, man. Listen, man. It's all about. For me, it's all about just having like the growth mindset, which you have definitely. You know, and that's I think one of the things that keep us so close is that, you know, for me, life. You got one life to live, man. And if I ever see someone living a certain way or having some type of experience, the first question I have is like, man, like, why not me? How come I can't try that? How come I can't be that or do that? Mm-hmm. And then once you kind of in your mind say like that's a goal, you just try to figure out, you know, what are the different steps, you know, people I can talk to, learn how they got there, et cetera, et cetera. So to answer your question, man, now first you kind of get exposed to, you know, new things, you know, new options, new routes. And then once you become exposed, it kind of really starts that engine turning. But to your point, man, like my parents, you know, they're educated people, but they were not throwing money at me when I was in school. So for me, I needed money. Like my parents didn't give me any money at all. So the first thing I had to do was get a job. So I don't know if you remember this freshman year, I basically was working at Marshall's in Pentagon City.
You security, night shift.
Right? No. That was my summer internship after my freshman year. I was a security guard at Walgreens.
That was an internship?
47th. No. It was only an intern. It was a job. It was a summer job.
Okay.
I was putting my life on the line every day for somebody who was taking M&Ms out of the you know, so that just kind of shows you the evolution of, you know, where we came from and kind of, you know, what we're seeing now. But now at that point, I was just literally a cashier at Marshall's on the register in Pentagon City, which is like for people, you know, everybody knows that. I think it's still around. Like, and so I would go to class. At that point, I was in the School of Engineering, computer science major. I would go to class, do classes, study, and then hop on a 6 o'clock train and then come back around like 10, 11, walking from basically like the metro stop on Georgia all the way to Drew Hall, where, you know, as you know, Drew Hall was definitely a place where a lot of memories were made.
Man. Yeah. I remember them times, man. So, you know, your freshman year, you basically working side hustle because parents is making you get it on your own, which is which in hindsight is a great look because it makes you appreciate things a little bit more. So
and focus, man, because that actually was believe it or not, that was actually the highest GPA I ever got. Was that year where I was working. Yeah, where I was working. But at a certain point, I was like, because I had to focus, man. But at a certain point, I think a lot of people make this decision. You're like, look, half of college is really the social. It's like B school. Like half the experience is like the relationships you build and like those times that you just can't get any other kind of way. So then my mind started turning to, okay, there's some people getting paid on campus. Like, what are these gigs about? Let me try to figure out how I can get paid, but not necessarily have to leave campus. And, you know, we all basically kind of find our hustles. For me, it was Chief of Staff, School of Business Student Council. That was a paid role. I was on the homecoming committee. That was a paid
now, what
role.
year is this? What year is this?
I want to say, man, sophomore year maybe.
So sophomore
Junior,
year.
sophomore,
So sophomore year,
sophomore year,
you
sophomore year,
kind of figuring out the landscape. You like,
junior year. I
okay,
think I can't remember. Huh?
kind of creating your brand. You figuring out the landscape at Howard. You know, you looking around. You seeing cats that's getting paid to do homecoming, student government, and that's funny, man, because I didn't really know that student government jobs paid and year one paid until like it was too late to even get into that. So how did you even find out about that?
Man, just people, man. I mean, hanging out with people like you, Armand, Cam, you know, all these people found their hustles. If you were in the School of Engineering, there was like this tutoring program called Houston. I don't know if you remember that. That was the highest paying program. I ultimately made the move out of engineering into the School of B, because I just felt like it just fit my personality more. And also they just had a really, like, the jobs that they had come into School of B were like top notch. And I felt like were more my speed. So I made that transition to computer information systems in the School of B. But so I didn't have the opportunity to use them, but, you know, Armand and a lot of our other friends, student government, you know, I got kind of put on to like, wait, you guys are getting paid to like basically hang out and kind of work, but not really putting in work. Meanwhile, I'm walking all the way down every day. And as you know, DC, Northwest wasn't really sweet back then. So that mile walk back from Georgia at 10, 11 p.m., I mean, it was a dicey walk. So I just saw like it could be a little bit sweeter. So I just said, all right, what's the move? And, you know, after that point, that's where I learned about just making connections and building relationships, you know.
Now, was this an appointed position? You had to interview for this?
And that's where relationships come in. When I was chief of staff, School of Business Student Council, it was under Xavier Carter, who is one of my line brothers now. But at the time, we were in Phi Sigma Pi. So is Josh, which is like basically the honors fraternity at Howard. Are they gone from Howard, by the way?
Yeah, gone. Rest in peace, man. God bless the dead.
It's unfortunate.
Gone, but not.
But yeah. So you build those relationships, and then he basically put me on, man. He was like, I got you. And he put me on as chief of staff.
Transition to junior year. Is this when you decided to become an alpha?
A couple steps in between. I think the first step was, like I said, I made that move from the School of Engineering to the School of B. For me, that was important for a couple reasons. One, I just realized like the School of Engineering, I got a lot of friends who were in the School of Engineering. My vibe was more School of Business, where it was kind of more outgoing business. Like that was kind of my thing. But I remember it was two considerations. One, I think the average GPA in the School of Engineering at that point was like 2.8 or something. I had a 3.5 or something. And I was like, all right, look, if all the smart people I know are basically their GPA is dropping, and I remember the School of B, you couldn't transfer in unless you had over a 3. I was like, let me go ahead and pull that trigger now, get in there and finagle before I kind of get stuck in a situation I don't think is necessarily the best fit for me.
Same way I got in, man.
Exactly. And I think that's part of it too, man. Like you kind of have to know your strengths and know where you think you'll shine, and then kind of just make those moves, man. So that was the first step. And then once I got in there, I actually had a little bit more time to breathe as well, because then I could balance my schoolwork with social activities. You, Cam, you know, our crew, you guys inspired me. You guys went and did Campus Pals when I was kind of doing the Pentagon City move. I wasn't part of that. All my friends did it. And I was like, oh, man, I missed that boat, because every day y'all come back and talk about how much fun it was and everybody you guys are hanging out with. And I was like, all right, so that basically made me say I need to find some money on campus and stop leaving campus. And second thing was like, I need to get more involved with stuff happening on campus, like Campus Pals, which I did that next year, as you know.
What made you become an alpha? And the reason I asked that question is because you became an alpha at Howard. Is beta chapter. And for those of you know, the beta chapter, that means it's the second chapter of the fraternity. And I think it's a significant question, because once I graduated from Howard, I didn't realize the historical significance of all of these fraternities and sororities. Like how Howard was basically so essential in the grassroots of it all. Tell me the motivation behind coming to Alpha.
I mean, first of all, so I mean, it's a couple of things to unpack there. So I'll start with kind of the mentality, you know. So I've always been a guy who, you know, like to see what other people are doing and then try to figure out how I can make that happen, right? And I've always been a guy as well who, you know, I don't want to say money driven, but more so like I want to be able to really understand what the best of life is, right? And so really it's about how can you put yourself in a position to do that. And I remember my brother and I, like I said, 11 months apart. So we always got treated almost like twins, except when we got in trouble, then he would get it worse because he was the oldest. So it was like, for me, it was the best of both worlds. But he would always, a year before me, get opportunities. I remember he was able to get his work permit before me. He was making $5 an hour. And at that time, our allowance as kids was like, I want to say $5 a week. And so he went from making, $5 a week to, I don't know, $400 a week, whatever the math is. I remember just being so upset and crying and just being like, man, I can't believe it. And so I've always had that kind of drive where it's like, man, I want to go get it. And I try to make it happen. And so translate that, moving that forward, my grandfather is actually an Alpha, so kind of growing
really?
up. Yeah. He served in World War II and he went to Hampton.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, he went to Hampton.
That's what I like about Howard Casby from like dope families.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
he went to Hampton off the GI Bill and met my grandmother at Hampton, and he pledged. Yeah,
what
over there?
I didn't know that, man. I had no clue.
Yeah. And I have an uncle as well. His son, my uncle is also an Alpha. So I only have Alphas in my family. I was looking at what I felt represented me most. Yeah. And to be honest, when I first came there, I was kind of peeping the scene. I also, like you, Howard, is a very special place. And like you said, you don't really realize it until you kind of unpack it and you get there. But when you understand how significant the Greek life is, not just on Howard's campus, but like across the world, because, so many Alpha chapters are, beta chapters for us. I mean, we're the longest running chapter, of a Black fraternity, that there is, because we basically founded in 1907, and then Cornell unfortunately got snatched basically. And so they didn't exist on Cornell's campus anymore after a long stretch. And so we were the longest running, like Black fraternity chapter, like ever basically. And so we get into that history, and I had a good, good amount of our friends, including you, just kind of had the what I felt was like the Alpha mentality, which is, this is, and I think it's school specific, but for me, it was like a cool guy who's about his business. And at the end of the day, is a well-rounded guy who, can do the ladies thing. He can do the fun thing, funny guy. And I just felt like a well-rounded guy. I'm not even
gonna get into that with you. We were roommates, bro. I'm gonna leave that one out the whole podcast.
We've grown since then, but yeah, I mean, I just felt like it was a good fit for me. And then to your point, just going through that process, which of course, anything at Howard is a process. It was definitely a self-discovery experience.
That, bro. Just touch on that.
Process?
Like anything at Howard is a process, man.
Yeah,
I think that's like the gift and the curse. It's like what do you think about that? Because you join an organization, you minding your business. Next thing you know,
yeah, man. I mean, it's funny, man, because it's one of those things where it's like with age, hindsight is 20/20, right? So at the time, I didn't realize what was really happening. And like, even now, we just talked about how Phi Sigma Pi, the National Honors Fraternity, got snatched for basically hazing. Right. That's just like an indication of how prevalent it is on Howard's
campus.
With
Campus Pals, man. Go on.
Campus Pals. It's like every organization is getting into things that, basically can risk them being snatched. I don't think anything is worth that risk. But a lot of people come through that process and they just kind of feel like, they have a sense of ownership around like, this is what the process is. It needs to stay that way. I don't necessarily feel that is the best thing now with my mentality, but I also realize that there's a lot of younger people kind of making these decisions, man, and driving this behavior. College kids, you know what I mean? So my perspective on it is like, man, focus on the work, focus on like the service, focus on like the reason the organization exists. And if you do have a process, make it a mental process, like make it something that involves personal growth.
Part of the beta chapter. And like you said, like you did a lot to be in a fraternity. Like, what does that mean when you look back on it now, 20 plus years later?
I mean, it's significant, man. And I appreciate the significance more and more because as you get older, you realize that these are actually like organizations and institutions and part of a legacy. And you start to appreciate the being part of a legacy. And then you ask yourself, what do you want your own legacy to be? So I think like in my life, as I collect these different experiences that have like blessed me in different ways, like I keep that in mind and say, okay, my goal is, when I'm at a point where when I'm in a position where I can, really try to influence things for the good of those organizations, like that's going to be my focus. Like going back to the institutions that I felt really shaped me and try to create a situation where more people can get that experience or you can enhance that experience for other people, man. So as far as the frat specifically, like I said, man, I got a group of brothers from it. I got a bunch of focus from it. And then more importantly, like what I feel like is a very positive force in terms of like the image of Black men in America and like perpetuating, you know, academics, service. These things are great. So I actually think it's like, you know, they're great role models. And even when I think back, like we did it all, like you said, you know, we did we threw parties, we did, you know, the whole nine. But I think at the end of the day, I think we were respected because we were well-rounded about our business, but also like, you know, can be social and you know, and be about service and all that good stuff, man. So the well-roundedness that I feel like I have in the circle of like authentic people around me, I could definitely attribute to Howard and like the frat.
You know, let's fast forward. So you get to graduation, you know, you got some good experiences from internships under your belt.
Yeah.
And I think your first job was that Johnson & Johnson?
Yeah, that's right. It was the Information Management Leadership Development Program. So like a 2-year rotational program at J&J. I was there for 4 years total, man. And when I think back at that experience, like that was also like a really great situation for me in terms of like how I got there, like why. I mean, I was interviewing like everybody else was doing. And ultimately, like I took the job that I felt paid the most money. You know, at that point, I think it was like, I don't know, man. I felt like it was a lot of money. I felt like it was 58,000, 60,000, something like that, which at that point, I mean, that was crazy money. And it was like a rotational program. You get exposure. It was going to have me moving to New Jersey. And I, again, never lived really anywhere outside of Chicago, outside of Howard. So it was just a whole new beginning, man. And so, yeah, I took that opportunity and was there for 4 years and met a lot of really good people I'm still in touch with today.
Nice. So you're on the East Coast, right? Doing that?
I'm on the East Coast. It's funny. The guy who recruited me was another Howard guy, man, which also shows you kind of the power of the network. He ended up managing me and being a sponsor and like writing business school essays and everything else after that, you know, just showing love. So the Howard connection runs deep, man. And I benefited from that in my first job coming out.
So you go from, and I know, you know, so you go from Johnson & Johnson. I think you left there and went to
McMaster-Carr. Yeah.
And
so
then,
that,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead. No, that was like it's like a lesser known brand, but it's like a multi-billion-dollar private like supply chain distribution company, basically. An opportunity there was,
so, I mean,
yeah.
You're obviously doing good, man. You're doing well, I should say. You know, by most people's standards. At what point did you have the nerve to say, I'm gonna go to B school?
Yeah.
At what point was enough? You know what I'm saying? At what point was you like, you know what? I'm gonna go to B school, and tell me, you know, what that process of, you know, like what triggered that emotion and turned that emotion into action of you wanting to go to B school?
It opened my eyes, man. After I left J&J, that was my first big risk I took because that was a very comfortable situation. I had a lot of sponsors and mentors looking out for me and like a great community. And Shaquan, who went to Howard, who's also an Alpha, who was a year under me, actually was a recruiter there. And it was an opportunity to basically manage like teams of 25, 30 people. It was like a 26-year-old, 27-year-old. And, you know, a lot of the people that I was managing were like almost twice my age. And so getting that opportunity for me really expanded my horizon and say, man, if I can manage, you know, a team of 30 people who potentially twice my age, and, you know, I could do anything. And at that point, it was really about, like I said, the exposure conversation. People like Alex Dixon, who I know you had on the podcast, he was in this thing called investment banking, which I heard about, but I didn't really know what it was, but it sounded like it was good money and it sounded like it was, you know, sexy or whatever. So I was like, what is that about?
What's good money? I hear people say that. I always wonder, what's good money?
I would say at that point in your 20s, I would say 6 figures is probably just good money. If you're making over 100K in your 20s back then, that's a win. He was on his grind. It was very clear he was on his grind. But I think the reality was I knew the only way I could make that transition was to go to business school. And so that's when I put that on the radar. And then it was like, all right, well, if I go through the process, you know, what schools could I get into? And then sometimes, you know, when you're in that situation where it actually, you know, becomes an opportunity, that's when you say, oh man, this is real. I'm gonna go for it.
You know, fast forward back to McMaster-Carr, you know, and I always hear, you know, every time I hear people that go to McMaster-Carr, they end up, their next move is like pretty big, or they end up staying at McMaster-Carr because they're, you know, doing well there. So, so you at McMaster-Carr, B school, was that the next move?
Yeah, man, I just kind of felt like, you know, I saw myself wanting to take it up one more level. And to me, like another level was like, you know, whether it's, you know, for me, I heard about this thing called investment banking. I just kind of wanted to see what it was like. But for me, it was like, I want to challenge myself to try to be the best. And to me, I felt like what I was doing, I was growing, but it was equipping me with tools to do something else. Like I didn't see myself as like, this is what I'm going to do. So I was there for almost 2 years, but I didn't see myself like staying there and putting my stake in like, this is the career. Mm-hmm. So my mission was always to try to upgrade myself from a skill set perspective. And I've just felt like I wanted to learn the skills of, finance, high finance. I wanted to be around who was considered to be kind of the best and the brightest. And so the only feasible transition was B school.
Like, did you have an idea of where you wanted to go? Or you was just like, hey, I'm gonna just take this exam and
yeah,
because
I just started putting it out there, man. I was like, started talking to people about it, and then I heard about this program called MLT through.
What is MLT?
MLT is Management Leadership for Tomorrow, but it's basically like it's a nonprofit organization, and they have multiple programs. Like one high school program that prepares you for internships in high school. Another one I was in called MBA Prep, which basically prepares you to go to like top business schools. And actually, it's a stat, man. When I was in business school, 40% of all underrepresented minorities in top 10 business schools came through MLT. So in some ways, like just getting into MLT, you knew it was going to give you a leg up. And basically, in that program, they hit you with like a coach who helps you with your essays, a cohort of people who are all applying at the same time, like sharing information. And then also like, some support in terms of like study groups for the GMAT, which is like a hurdle for a lot of people. And so, ultimately, man, the best part about it was after you get into business school, you actually know a good number of people there already. So you hit the ground with relationships you had built over the last year and a half that are like really real, authentic relationships.
So that's dope, man. And right now, you being really humble, bro. Like, what was it like getting the acceptance letter to Harvard?
I remember exactly where I was, man. I remember exactly where I was. I remember it was.
If they could
so, so let me give you kind of like a little bit of background. So I only applied to 3 schools because basically for me, it was like, I wanted to stay in the New York area. I just was feeling kind of the New York vibe and the New York energy. So I applied to Columbia Business School, NYU Business School through a fellowship called the Consortium, where basically they pay for your tuition and fees if you are selected basically for this fellowship and you are actually accepted into the school. And then what they call the MLT, your dream school, which for me was Harvard, man. I think especially as like a Black guy, man, you kind of hear about Harvard. It seems like it's not necessarily accessible to you. So when you think like reach your dream, you kind of think like that Harvard brand really stands out. And I was like, look, I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring. And I wasn't really expecting anything, to come back. I definitely didn't feel like, I was over and above a lot of the other people I knew were applying.
But did you realize like at that moment, like, yo, my life it's not gonna be the same as it was before? Or was it just like, I got into my dream school, let me make the best of it? Like, were you already thinking like 10 years down the road once you got that acceptance letter?
Man, no, but I feel like the way I look at life is just, it's a sequence of experiences, man. I just want to experience life, So for me, I knew it would be a new aspect of life I'd be able to experience that I hadn't before. And I knew it'll probably be good. And that was it. And when I think about why I probably got selected, it had a lot to do with me making that move, going to McMaster-Carrick. And not many people could say, hey, I managed 30-some people, at the age of 26. And so what felt like a risk at that point ultimately became a differentiator. But really, the genesis of it was I was just kind of stretching myself and having that growth mindset, man. So just coming back to that. But, so anyway, I'm sitting in McMaster-Carrick. We have these little computer terminals. I'm hearing that, because you don't just get in, you get invited to an interview first. Mm-hmm. All right. So then, I hear like, they starting to send out interview requests. And one day I just click on my email and it's like, boop. And it's like Harvard. I click on it and it's like, the first word was like, congratulations. I remember just being like, yes, you know what I mean? you know how we get down.
You called when that happened?
Probably Mom Dukes. Probably Mom
so
Dukes.
How did you, I mean, that's gotta really feel gratifying for parents to, to really feel like, damn, I'm a good parent. Like, what was that conversation?
Yeah. Like? Nah, man. I mean, look, dude, let's be real, man. I think what drives a lot of us is like the idea of making our family proud, I want my mom to feel like, because I felt like my mom did a good job and my mom and dad made sacrifices. So I want them to feel like they're getting the ROI on their investment. Or I think a lot of people just want to see their kids, man, have opportunities they didn't have. That's the other thing. I think that's like the ultimate sense of fulfillment. having a kid, having 2 kids myself, like that in and of itself is rewarding. But to know that your kid has now been able to like create their own path and potentially like, have their own lane and potential to like achieve great things. I mean, or at least be on that journey, that's the ultimate fulfillment, I think. So to being able to like deliver news like that, it's almost like saying, you got drafted, into the league, basically. Like, will you be an all-star? You know what I'm saying? We don't know, but we all know that just being able to say you made it into the league is a win and nobody can take that from you. So that's how I kind of felt at the time. And it gave me a sense of like self-confidence, like, okay, look, if I can get through this door, then, I feel a lot more confident I can get through any door. And really, my only limiting factor is, any limiting factor I put on myself.
What were some of the things that, maybe you had to sacrifice, or maybe some L's that you took along the way that kind of made you, want that Harvard life, or want what Harvard could kind of, provide for you?
Nah, man, that's a good question, man. I mean, it's funny, they had a saying at Harvard where they say Harvard accepts people who don't need Harvard to be successful, but don't know it, or whatever the case may be, something like that. Where when I think about like, what is it? Why did they have interest? I was thinking about what I was doing at that time. I think it was really just staying busy, man, and not depending on just being a self-starter, not depending on opportunities to come your way, but be creating them, much like yourself with this podcast. It's like at that time I had a book club in New Jersey, for young professionals in the area. We had like 50 people. I mean, it was just like a labor of love, but it was a way for us to kind of have some fun, but also try to, have conversations that are actually, productive and focused on personal growth. I was on a board of like the Martin Luther King Youth Center in Bridgewater, New Jersey. You know what I mean? And I really cared about that mission. So I actually stepped up on the board, and then they appointed me VP, and again, these were like professionals at that point that were like 50s. And, so kind of being that young guy who is, willing to put in the work and the energy. So, when I'm saying like, hey, what I'm doing, I think they're assessing me and they're saying like, hey, man, this guy basically just kind of creates these patterns of like trying to create value and trying to, grow, personal growth. And so I think that mentality was what really said, okay, regardless of the scores. And I was fortunate enough to have enough support like MLT, et cetera, to actually do okay on the exams. But the reality is it was more so, I think they're looking for people who have the, the eye of the tiger, or whatever the case may be, and they try to pinpoint those characteristics that aren't necessarily driven by like, and don't get it twisted. There's a lot of people who had like 800s on the GMATs and like, perfect scores on this and that, but they really want to mix up the class with a bunch of different experiences and perspectives so that, everybody gets the most out of it. But in terms of like roadblocks, the grind, man, the GMAT, I've when I went to Wall Street, I failed the series exam, embarrassing things like that. Like I take L's all the time.
Tell me about that, man. I mean, so when you were was that when you were at what company was it?
So, all right. So I was actually, all right. I mean, look, we can get into all the nuances, but long story short, when I got into business school, I was able to get a fellowship, the Merrill Lynch fellowship, which basically means they covered tuition your first year, and then you do an internship. And if you do well in the internship and get an offer, they'll cover your second year if you commit to work there after you graduate. And so I took that on. And that just so happened to be like right during the Great Recession. So what normally would have been a class like 150 associates was like 17. And I was one of the few people who was able to kind of secure a position in that class. Wow. A lot of offers being reneged and this and that.
Wow.
So once you come through that, you basically then start full time after you graduate. So they had already paid for my school, but within like the first, I forget what it is, 6 months or something, you got to take the series exam. And it's just kind of, I mean, you took the series exam, right?
Yeah.
And I remember studying in just like also being in New York at the same time. I mean, it's a lot of distractions in New York, but and failing, man. And it was embarrassing because I had a class of people who were taking it with me. We all were studying together in the whole nine. And like we had, I had a lot of good friends, and it was an embarrassing situation, man. But I think it basically goes back to like this idea of like resilience, man. This is really what Howard teaches you too, because as you know, and I just want to get your thoughts on this too, man. A building, just getting a validation sticker. I mean, I remember semester after semester, man, just being in situations where I felt like I may be going home because like I was short a tuition bill, whatever the case may be. Like seriously thinking I was about to go home, and then building some relationships, talking to this person, tapping into some network and just being
I
resourceful
remember you saying
and
that.
figuring a way
I
out.
remember you hearing about that long after we graduated. That was the case. I mean, are these like so when you face these challenges or what some people may consider a failure, like how do you deal with these setbacks? Because here you are, Howard graduate, Harvard MBA, so we thinking best of the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take that series exam and you fail. Like what was that experience like? Like when you
Man,
started, like
it was painful, man. It was extremely painful. You know what I mean? It was painful. It was embarrassing. It was like
what was your job? What were they saying?
disappointing. Well, you get to take it again, but I think the biggest thing is it's really just the public perception, because ultimately, like, it's an exam that you're supposed to take and pass, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's why it's designed. But to answer your question, man, I think, you just kind of deal with that and just say, look, it is what it is, right? Like, like it happened. You just kind of have to say, you ask, like, what do you do? I mean, you actually just try to think bigger, because really success is the best revenge. When I say revenge, it's not like you're trying to prove anybody else wrong, but you're proving to yourself, this is just one chapter. I'm still moving on. There's really nothing, my ability to maneuver and navigate is not based on any specific outcome. It's based on the mentality I have. And like, if I take an L, that's just an L, man. You have to take L's, man. You have to take shots. You got to take shots.
I mean, it's a humbling experience too. It's a dose of reality.
Right. Exactly. And you realize, you can be touched, if you're a cocky person, and it shows you, man, you never know what could poke a hole.
I want you to compare and contrast real quick, like the difference between being at Harvard versus Howard.
Dude, first of all, man, Howard, like I said, it made me the person who I am. And so until that happens, you can't do anything else, right? So the Howard experience, if I had to pick between the two, is a no-brainer. But to me, I feel like the HBCU plus the Ivy League experience, like as a combination, if you can go to a HBCU, like my kid, for example, he's living a completely life than I grew. I grew up Southside Chicago. Like I was telling you before, we had metal detectors on the high school doors. I mean, we saw some, was in the middle of a mix that could have gone either way. My son now, we live in Palo Alto, California. I mean, crime is like zero. It's like, it's not the same environment. And so for me, especially if you're someone who feels like your kid is, someone who kind of really needs to explore their own identity, then send them to Howard, because you just can't duplicate that experience. Now, when you throw on top of that, like that self-confidence and like the friendships and like just kind of a sense of stability that you get mentally from going to a place like Howard, with all the open doors that come with the Ivy League institution, I mean, to me, that's when you actually have like the best of both worlds, man. So I feel really blessed to be able to experience both of those, because I really feel like it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I've always, said to myself, like, man, if you're gonna go undergrad, go to HBCU. Even though HBCU not for everybody, but I'm like, all right, once you pick in grad schools, that's a total business decision, But so with that, I mean, what do you feel like when people say, black schools don't have the resources, or the world is not black? Like, what do you think? Like, when I hear people say that, on one level it's frustrating, but at the same time, it's like, they just don't know better.
Right.
When you hear a person says, why would you go to Howard? They don't have the resources of a Big Ten school, or, a school in the Big East or something like that. What are your thoughts?
I mean, two thoughts, man. The first one is, it's really about the people at the end of the day. Like Howard is an institution of people. So regardless of what facilities or, athletic facilities, whatever you want to call it, you have, is really about the people. And Howard attracts, in my mind, if you're talking about, black people, the upper echelon in terms of just driven, confident, smart, well-dressed, like kind of the whole nine, you're getting at a Howard. And a lot of people don't appreciate this. But the second reason is, I feel like Howard taught me what real diversity is, because once you take like race out of the equation, people are really, competing or making moves based on like their actual skills. Like it's the ultimate meritocracy, you know what I'm saying? Because you don't have to think about, oh man, this happened because, this was racist or this wasn't, whatever the case may be, it's just out of the equation. So if you're trying to go and run for, Mr. School of B, like you got to be creative. You got to come up with a talent. You gotta be able to speak. You're really competing off the work you put in and like the image you're able to convey or inspire in people. And so to me, like that's the ultimate way to actually learn how to adapt in the real world, because you're actually operating in meritocracy and understanding your own strengths.
So now you move west. Charlotte, your wife. So you guys pack it up. Y'all move to the West Coast. Yep. You get a job with great opportunity with Google. What were you doing at Google?
When I first came into Google, Groupon was all the rage. Like you remember when daily deals frenzy, everybody was doing daily deals. Like it was the biggest thing in the world. So Groupon was big. Google tried to buy Groupon for $6 billion and Groupon said no. And so Google basically did what Google does. All right, well, we're going to start our own and we're going to take over the whole industry. And so they ramped up this team and they brought me in to run product operations for like that product basically. And it's funny because 6 months into it, they basically decided to what they call deprecate the product. But basically, it just means they shut it down because they realized it wasn't necessarily a profitable model or really a scalable model. So they basically said, "Look, we're getting out of this business." Wow. And then I was looking for a new role within Google. So Google, the good thing is when they shut down a product, you just find something else to do. It's not like you get like the axe or anything. But I happened to only for that reason, which was, I wasn't necessarily happy about that, but I stumbled into my next role, which is running product operations for some products in the advanced technology and products group within Google, which was like a skunkworks division focused on like frontier hardware technology. And so VR, AR, all kind of the genesis of those computer vision technologies started in this team. And I was basically running product operations for that team, man, which definitely exposed me to a lot as far as learning and understanding tech.
What is it like, running an operation or running a team and you're in charge of, let's say, a staff that probably know more about than what you do. What is that like?
Man, I think it's funny because I'm dealing with that now because I just made a move from Google after about 7 years over to LinkedIn, where it's the same thing. I'm coming in and I got, a pretty large organization and I have like layers in the organization and everybody knows more about how things are done there than me. And so I think there's a few things you gotta bring to the table, man. The first is you have to like tread this balance between listening and trying to understand what's really happening on the ground from the people that know what they're talking about, but also being willing to offer your perspective, which they value as someone who came from a different place and saw maybe things done differently. So everybody has some valuable perspective to offer. So I think the key is figuring out ways to offer that perspective in a relevant way without basically sounding like you have all the answers and you know everything and turning people off because, you kind of come in like you're a know-it-all, because we all know that it's impossible to know what will work in an environment that you're not familiar with. You're working with people who've been there already and do this and breathe this, So I think that's the other piece is, man, you got to figure out like by listening, what are the opportunities? What are the opportunities? A lot of times just being a fresh face, it gives you like autonomy to suggest things and try drastic things that people who are kind of in that situation couldn't get away with because they expect you to come in with some new ideas, which is like the second piece. And the third piece, man, I think is just communicate well and build relationships, man. It's like, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm going to do, and then follow up. And then just, put in work in terms of just getting to know people, try to build authentic relationships so that if they had to choose between three people, they're like, I'm going to choose Brandon because I actually like him. He's a cool dude.
Is that something that you're conscious of when you're in the corporate world? Like, I need to build relationships?
Yes and no. I feel like the best relationships come organically. At the same time, I think you got to put yourself in a situation where you're interacting with people who, are good people to know.
If you were like, I guess, chief diversity officer, or if you could pinpoint why it's a lack of diversity issue in tech, I mean, why do you think that is?
People are afraid to tie it to compensation. If you tie it to compensation, it'll happen because people are gonna execute on what pays them. And so I've been in companies where that's the case. Where they say all the good stuff and they say they're throwing money at the problem, but their numbers aren't moving. And I've been in places where basically in your performance review, you have to show that for open positions, you brought a diverse slate. And if you didn't do that, you actually get a deduction in terms of like your rating.
So you're saying like HR, like if it was part of their compensation to find the best qualified minority candidate,
they have to bring a diverse slate.
Okay.
And diverse, again, you have to think about like what diverse means. A lot of times that's the other piece. That's a tricky word, man. You know, diversity is a very catch-all bucket. So it can be women, it can be you know, like LGBT, it can be race, it can be, you know, people that are in tech, technically the majority, but in the US a minority. And so you specifically got to say underrepresented minorities, you know, and you specifically have to say like African Americans, Hispanic, and also like Native American Indian. And like that's what you're saying when you say a diverse slate. It needs to include folks that represent like that slate, like a representative population of candidates that touch on it underrepresented minority specific angle, you know.
I feel like, you know, our friends are all successful. Everybody's doing their thing in their own right, but obviously it's going to be some folks that are more successful than others. I mean, how do you balance that? How are you able to play in those worlds where like, all right, this minute I'm director of LinkedIn, then I go visit, you know, this sector of friends. I'm Brandon, I'm Beach. Like, how do you do that without, you know, I guess shunning people? Like, what is that balance like? Because it has to be. You have to see the world through a different lens when you come back home to Chicago and you're around family who they don't know you as director of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I know you.
And I want I mean, and that's not how I want it. I want them to just know me as me. Yeah.
Like what is that like? What is that like? Because and for all intents and purposes, man, every day that you reach a new height, you kind of like are advancing Black history, man. You know what I'm saying? Whether you look at it like that or not, you know, you're in a position where it's not necessarily about you. It's about that next Black guy that's from the South Side of wherever, you know what I'm saying? Because they're going to be like, man, BJ was here and he killed it. We got to hire, you know, this other cat. You know what I'm saying? Like, just expand on some of the thoughts that come through your mind when I say that.
Honestly, man, I'm blessed, man, because I was brought up in a family. I won the family lottery in terms of like just being instilled the right values and also being in a situation where everything wasn't sweet. So when you grow up in a situation where you're faced with some of the harsh realities of life, you know what I mean? And you got people around you who are getting shot, you know, or, you know, getting pregnant in high school, or, you know, just so many things that so many pitfalls that we have along the way that stunt a lot of our potential. It gives you a certain level of humility that stays with you. And as you accumulate more experiences, your view doesn't change. It just becomes bigger, but your values stay the same. So if anything, you start connecting the dots and saying like, okay, how can I leverage the information I have? Because, you know, one of the pieces of value I offer is my journey. A lot of the circles that, you know, I get exposed to or intersect with now, there's nobody like me there. And so that just makes me more interesting to people. And that's a good thing. If you're confident enough in yourself, that's a good thing, because then you just being yourself and you actually build authentic relationships with people who just appreciate the fact that, you know, they feel as fortunate enough to get to know you and have stuff in common with you, more so than you even feel kind of being in that situation, man, which goes back to that second thing I was telling you about. So like if you're in your 20s, it's really about surrounding yourself with people who can help you keep a certain level of focus and not pull you down. If you continue to do your thing in your 30s, then you'll realize, especially, you know, unfortunately, if you're coming from like our community, that as you become more successful, you're going to see less and less of us. So then it's less about, you know, the people you're hanging out with. It's more just the circles you're in, figuring out how to connect the dots and figure out ways to, you know, like enhance your understanding of how business actually works, how the world actually works. And then there's a connective tissue between, or thread between, like what we talked about before. And I didn't even realize I was doing this, man, because it wasn't like I was doing all these things to go to B school.
Yeah.
Like when I was doing the book club and the youth center, I just felt like, man, I just kind of felt like it was just stuff that I felt authentically like it was me, man. I just felt like I wanted to do. And so I think if you had that mentality out here, it's just a new set of things. So maybe you're doing a fundraiser, or maybe you're doing a podcast, or maybe you're doing something else, but you're staying busy just because the growth is the personal growth, man. That's what is really the driver at the end of the day.
You know, people never talk about is just the importance of marrying somebody that's at your level. Or, you know, like marrying a true partner who can provide that motivation, that kick in the ass, that
yep.
you know what I'm saying, that can really balance you out, man, because you like I said, you guys are living in Palo Alto, man, and you're raising a black family. You know what I'm saying? But you guys are accelerating in your career. And, you know, I would love for you to tell me, we can start with that question, man. What is it? You don't have to go into details about Charlotte, but just like talk about the importance of just of being with somebody and being equally yoked in terms of like career success and just balance needed to succeed in everyday life.
Now, in terms of like what you said, man, like I said, I won a family lottery. Like you don't choose who you're born to and like the values they give you, but you do get to choose your spouse. And even in that situation, you know, you don't fully control the circumstances after you get married, man, but that's probably the biggest decision you'll ever make in your life in general, period. And so for me, it was really about finding a partner. I know a lot of guys who choose women for different reasons. Some of them might choose them for, you know, unfortunately for like looks or aesthetics. In that case, that's going to fade over time. You know what I mean? And what are you left with? Some people choose someone who, you know, they just want to like kind of let them live their current life that they already have, whether it's like they like to go with their friends and go to the bars every day. The wife who's okay with that, like they don't have to compromise on their lifestyle. There's some guys who, you know, will choose a wife who, you know, they just want to have a lot of kids for them. You know what I mean? And then you got guys who choose someone who they really view as an equal partner who contributes equally and has equal respect and brings it as much, if not more, to the table than me. And I feel privileged to even be in the situation. And I think that when I felt like I found that when I was, you know, kind of a single guy, that's literally what decided, you know, made me make the decision like, all right, this is the one I want to marry. Because I think every guy decides, how am I even going to figure out who I'm going to marry? Like, you know, how do you even know when you're in love and this kind of stuff? I think when you know what you're looking for and then it hits you, then the decision is made for you. And at that point, the question is, can you seal the deal? You know what I mean? Can you run the G and can you keep them captivated enough where you can close the deal? That's really the question at that point.
One of the things I know, you know, just getting back to some things that you do outside of work, man. I mean, your podcast that you have and how you was able to basically, you know, some things. I know that you did a fundraiser for Kamala Harris, which was pretty dope. You've been able to build relationships with Mr. October himself, Reggie Jackson. You know, how did you come to like this whole foreign territory of the West Coast? People don't know you from nothing, and you go from you know, I guess having an idea and then pushing it into reality. Because when you told me, you was like, yeah, I did this fundraiser for Kamala, and it was like a real one, not one of those joints where like we donated to her campaign. It was a joint where like she came through. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you dealing with, you know, you build a relationship with Reggie Jackson, who for his time period, you know, was, you know, the greatest clutch hitter of all time. You know what I'm saying? And who's somebody who forever be known in the history of baseball. Like, how did you do those things, man? Because you already balancing career and doing it there. What made you want to take it a step further and try to, you know, make an imprint in that way?
Man, good question, man. And again, man, I appreciate it. Like, I don't feel like I have all the answers, man, but I'll just say, y'all think about it. The first is you just got to think big, man. A lot of times if you're thinking big, you can attract big thinking people to you because, you know, it's interesting. You know, like at the end of the day, you want to intrigue people and you want to think big. So thinking big could just be, I'm going to business school. And then some of your peers like, why would you give up 2 years of salary to pay money to go somewhere? It could be, I'm moving to the West Coast from New York. Why would you leave New York? You know, or it could be, you know, I'm going to do a fundraiser. But I think the reality is thinking big. And when you think big, you put yourself in situations that are a little bit more, I won't say exclusive, but like not as common because you're taking a not common risk to get there. And so when you get there, there's less people there. So there's more value there. So one of my favorite things I love to do at Google, man, when I was there was just like have everybody who I knew just come to Google and just like walk them around the campus, man, because two reasons. One, you know, you just kind of want to expose people to like that environment. And so they think about themselves or their kids or whoever, internships, and might have them say like, man, this is actually a real situation. You know, are exposing people to that reality. And the second thing is it keeps you remembering how decide and take a step that may be uncomfortable actually can put you in a much more comfortable situation. As far as once you're in that situation, it's a skill that you have to build, but it's really learning how to leverage your platform. This podcast is a perfect example of that. Not only are you telling stories that people want to hear, but you having people who went to Howard have an opportunity to speak about the experience of Howard, which a lot of people that went to Howard are that passionate about it, where they actually enjoy that experience. But along the way, you get to build relationships and create additional value if you decide to do a video, if you try to expand in some other ways. And so how do you leverage a platform that you already have? And I think the third piece is, if you're thinking big, just being authentic, man. If you're an authentic person and people really feel a connection, you'll have somebody say, you know what, let's do this together. So, for example, a guy who is actually a chairman of MLT, is kind of a mentor. He just happened to be a Black guy from Chicago who started a company. He has a very successful tech company. He was founder and CEO of it. And MLT basically said, hey, we're pulling together alumni we have in the West Coast who, are in good situations, and we're going to bring them together for like a mastermind dinner. And so every quarter we would get together. It was like 10 of us, and just talked about what are we working on? Like, what are some challenges we're facing? And, what can we use some help with? And he would sit there, he would have it at his house, and he would also join in that conversation. And so we built a relationship. And, we had this idea of like, hey, we were kind of mobilized around the idea of like a Howard woman running for senator, which was historic in and of itself. And we were like, we want to help. And so let's talk about like a fundraiser. And then we thought, how big can we go? And then we thought, we started thinking about it. And he ultimately put his house up because he has a nice house. We have a little place that, may do for us, but definitely not a place where you can host, the number of people you need for a fundraiser like that. And we partnered with them. And in that process, we were able to actually introduce them to Kamala. And so it's kind of figuring out a way to create value in a situation where, I felt like, man, he actually gave us the best possible gift, which was his house plus covering like the bar and like the wait staff to make it a nice fundraiser. And then we just were thinking big in terms of let's do a fundraiser and let's do the work to get people on the host committee so that it feels like it's de-risked, which we did just using relationships.
Yeah.
And then ultimately he got the value of actually meeting her, and also kind of meeting all the other people that came as well, man. So it was a win-win.
That's dope, man. And that's, again, bro, I mean, like you said, thinking big and being around like-minded people definitely helps you, achieve greatness. So I want you to talk about some of the things that you're doing right now. I know you recently transitioned to LinkedIn. Congratulations again on that.
Thank you.
If you can talk about that a little bit, and tell me some of the things, whether it be board memberships or whatever, like some of the things that you're doing right now to keep that iron sharp.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. So I guess I'll start off LinkedIn, man. Basically, I'm heading up sales development for North America. And so LinkedIn sales, a lot of people just know it as like your professional resume online, but they actually have a bunch of products that help people connect with talent. So if you're hiring, they have solutions to help you sell to people. So you know exactly who works at the company and what position that you need to talk to. What are they reading? What's happening in their industry? And then we have learning as well. So, especially like a time like now with the whole COVID situation, a lot of people are doing online learning to upskill themselves. And so LinkedIn bought lynda.com, which was like one of the big learning platforms. And that's another product. And then there's an ads product as well. So anyway, my job is, it's about 150 full-time people. And my job is basically to be the growth and talent engine for LinkedIn. Growth meaning we're the first touch point for anybody who might be interested in having a conversation about buying our products, or we reach out to people and try to sell products. And then talent engine, and that if you basically want to start a sales career, we're like that first point. So a lot of people start off in sales development and then graduate and go into the field as like an account executive. And so that's basically what we do. What I'm really proud about is that board position you talked about, man. So in the overall scheme of things, as you kind of get exposed to different worlds and really just, if you have that growth mindset, you'll just be exposed to new and different things. And like the idea of being a board member is actually something that is not really common for people, I would say under, to be honest with you, like 50. And so the reason why that's the case is because they actually are looking for people who bring like legit experience to the table, because the role of a board is to like govern the CEO and hire and fire the CEO and basically look at the vision of the company and make sure that the company is thinking about all the considerations, both from like compliance to, governance to strategy to make sure the organization is focused on what it's supposed to be doing. So I joined the board last year of SCAN Health Plan, which is basically one of the nation's largest nonprofit Medicare Advantage plans. So basically healthcare for like elderly.
So how did you get that position or that role, or that opportunity?
Man, it was one of those things. Well, first of all, if you stay prepared, then you don't have to get prepared. But one day, man, a guy on my network who I had a relationship with, he sent for me an email and said, "Would you be interested in this?" And I looked down. I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "Is this a board role?" And at the time, I didn't know whether it was compensated or not. Like, I didn't know what it was, but I basically was like, "Let me take the conversation," because I really respected the guy. Number one. Yeah. Number two, I was like, if this is legitimately a board role, this is like one of the best opportunities you could ever have, because one of the hardest things about getting on a board is you need board experience to really de-risk it. You know what I mean? So this is to get your first board look is actually the hardest thing to do.
You can hire people, you can put people on, how do you, and I'm sure you get a lot of requests for stuff, man. How do you handle that? That's a lot of response, because I know you want to help everybody. You want to say yes to everybody. Hey, hook me up with Google this or LinkedIn that, or introduce me to this person. I see that in your network. Like, how do you balance that?
I mean, it's tough, man.
Stuff, man, and you've never told me no. I've been like, yo.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the answer, man. That's literally the answer. I'll start off with, like I told you before, there are specific institutions and things that were like very influential in making you who you are. And so I always will take, a call or try to make time for somebody who's Howard, who's MLT, who is, at HBS, particularly like a minority at HBS, all the different, my friends, my homies. I can always make time, man, because at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about for me. It's not changing who I am. It's like bettering myself, but staying true to who I am. And like, the definition of staying true to yourself is staying loyal to the people in institutions that put you in the position that you're in to begin with. So I make that time. Same time, like, there is a lot of reach outs, of course. My wife tells me, like, man, you take do you literally take every call that comes your way? Like, why, and so I remember one time, I was like, I'm going to put that little thing on LinkedIn where you say you need to know my email address and type it in before you can connect with somebody.
Yeah.
And I put that up for like a couple of days, man. I felt so bad about it. I just took it right back down, man, because I was just like, look, man, that's not who I am. So if anything, what I try to do now is like, I'll try to like get whoever may be interested in some specific like information or perspective. I'll try to get them in a group and then deliver it in a group. Kind of like how you did with like the Conversation, which is that series you put on in Chicago on different business topics,
What is it, the 38, 39-year-old Brandon tell the 17-year-old Brandon who's getting ready to go to Howard right now, if they want to have, similar success or better?
Listen, man, I don't have any regrets. Like, I feel like the path I took is what got me here. So I don't necessarily think that doing anything differently would necessarily be better, if the mindset is really just personal growth. But, at the end of the day, I would just say, take bigger risks earlier on, man. Just shoot for the stars, man, because that really is probably the hardest part. And once you set that mindset and you reinforce that mindset, then you're going to be successful in whatever you decide to do. And every day is really a grind anyway, whatever you decide to do, if you're like a productive person. So why not really think big, as you're doing it? And so I always try to think like, what's out there that's interesting, or do I feel like, is something that I want to get a part of. And then, the more you have that mindset, the more it validates itself until you get to the point where like you have enough stripes where you can walk into any room and be taken seriously because of all the stripes you have. So then you no longer have to say, I got to prove myself. Now, if anything, you're looking at a bunch of opportunities. You're trying to figure out how to handle them all.
That's a good look, bro. When you walk into a room and like, what I'm saying, when you don't have that pressure,
Yeah, I'm not there yet. Alex Dixon is there. I'm not there yet. I'm still working on that.
So one thing I want to know, man, what do you want your legacy to be?
Man, that's a good question, man. It's funny because I feel like that's what I work towards, but I never really could describe it. I guess it would be being really, really respected and inspiring to all those communities and all those institutions and people in those institutions that I said made me. So Chicago, you know what I mean? Howard, Alpha, MLT, all those institutions and all the people in those institutions, like being considered to be somebody who inspires the next generation. So like I said, whether it's like helping to innovate the School of Business and really make it like aim to make it the best business school in the country, like just really be, ambitious like that. If I could do that, like that would be the ultimate legacy for me, or if I could, expand MLT's programming or whatever the case may be, go to Chicago, focus on education. It's really just, I just want respect from the people that invested in me. I really don't care about respect from anybody else, because that's, to me, that's, you're not really in tune with what, what's real if you're trying to impress people that, don't care about you, basically. So I just want to make the people that really cared about me, invested in me, proud, man. That's it.
Dope, man. Dope, bro.
Family, mom, all that.
100%, man. 100%. Got to pay it forward. All right. So right now, this is the portion where I ask you a question, and you have to give the one word answer. You can't expound upon it. Okay. So we'll start it real easy for you, man. Real easy. Harvard or Howard?
Howard.
Wall Street or Silicon Valley?
Silicon Valley.
Timbs or Air Force Ones?
Ones.
Ho Chi or China Wonder?
China Wonder.
Who you know or what you know?
Who you know?
Quad or Annex?
Ooh. Quad.
Best Howard experience?
Yacht party.
Man of many talents or a specialist?
Many talents.
All right, cool. Good job, bro. All right, next one is these are some trivia questions, man. So this is gonna be put on blast to all my followers, man. So I hope you got these right. What's the Howard motto?
Ooh, I should know this. I feel like I do know this. How much time do I have?
Hey, man, I know Charlotte won't help with them kids, so.
Oh, Howard, we sing. Man, I don't remember, dude. What is it?
Truth and service.
Ah, yes. Okay. That's terrible. Forgive me, Howard people. Forgive me, Howard people. I still love Howard.
Who's the president of Howard?
Right now?
Yes.
Wayne Frederick. Dr. Wayne Frederick.
What is the neighborhood that Howard is located in?
Oh, neighborhood? Northwest DC. Gresham? I don't know.
LaJoy Park.
Oh, LaJoy Park. My bad. Okay.
What year was Howard founded?
1867.
Which team at Howard has won their 5th straight MEAC title?
Soccer team.
Women's volleyball.
Ooh.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Brandon Jones, man. Director.
Hey, man. It's a pleasure, man.
North America Products. I want to thank you again for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, bro. If people want to catch up with you or follow some projects that you got going on, how can they do that?
I'm not really a social media guy. It sounds weird, but I'm not. So like, that's not probably the best place to engage me. Maybe LinkedIn, if you're like a professional, connect with me on there. I would say check out seriesb.co. That's basically where I put my podcast up. I haven't done one in a couple of years now, but I plan on bringing it back. So if you want to stay connected, I would say subscribe to that podcast and expect hopefully something to come out in the next year. Cool,
man. Well, Athena, thank you, man, for being.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, man, I can't wait for it to kick off so I can hear.
Well, one question. I don't know if you want to answer it or not, but I'm gonna just ask it, and you can just say air it or not. Tell me what's next. Like, what are your future plans? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I see myself. Thank you, man. I see myself owning. You know what I mean? I see myself really, really owning something. So that either takes the place of like starting something and growing it, or buying something and running it, or as an investor, you know what I mean, in ownership by directing capital into opportunities. Like I see myself playing in one of those 3 spaces, primarily because ownership is where we under-index the most, in our community. And like my goal is really to try to drive serious impact in our community. both in terms of inspiring people, but also in terms of like actually getting on the ground and doing the work. And so that's important. And so I think to get in that position, that has to be done. And so, other than that, you know, I'll have to look at what specific opportunity is going to get me there, but that's the mindset.
Dope, man. Dope. Good to hear it. Thank you for joining the HU Movemaker podcast, where we highlight folks that have contributed to the Howard legacy at the highest levels. To hear more interviews or purchase merchandise, please visit www.humovemakers.com.